Hey y'all, welcome back to Dots and Beyond. My name is Beth. Today we are flipping through my 2023 reading journal. Let's go ahead and get started. My 2023 reading journey and journal was inspired by this journal. This is an Archer and Olive traveler size notebook. This was part of the Familiars line that came out in Halloween of 21, 22. We're not quite sure where it was. And the minute I saw it, I knew that I wanted this journal as my reading journal, and I knew that I was going to be reading some Edgar Allan Poe through the course of 2023. It was an instantaneous decision. I bought it. I knew that's what was going to happen. I inadvertently started an Edgar Allan Poe read-along. I just didn't even anticipate that people would want to read Edgar Allan Poe along with me. And by February, it became a thing. And I'm so grateful for all of you that came along on that Edgar Allan Poe reading journey. Like I said, it wasn't planned to be any kind of a group thing, but it has sort of inspired what we're doing for this year for those of you who still want to read along with me. And I just think it's the greatest thing ever. I set this up with an Edgar Allan Poe theme, because what else would I have done? There is a setup of this a year ago on my channel. It's in the reading list playlist, which is linked down below. The traveler size Archer and Olive notebooks are currently my favorite when it comes to a reading journal. I do have a discount code with them as well. It is D&B10, D&B10. If you would like to peruse their current catalog and pick up any notebooks, journals, pens, all of that good stationery stuff that we love from Archer and Olive. These were all done mostly with things that I already had and then some printables from an Etsy shop. This was my cover page. I did glue together these first two pages that never want to lie flat. And then I jumped straight into my index. Right off the bat, somebody at the beginning of the year was like, you're going to run out of space in your index. You're going to run out of space in your popular letters that books begin with. And there's a couple of spots that I got a little close. I also know that I don't read 150, 200 books a year, and so it should have lasted me okay. Where I ran into was P into Q, and I didn't read anything starting with a Q. I did expand my index for 2024, made it a double fold out, so I've got a little bit more space. And the index is it keeps the track of what I'm reading as well, so that I don't have to keep a separate reading tracker. My index is my reading tracker, my tracker is reading index. I did start using Storygraph, so if I want to glance at stats, they're there. I can go look at them. I don't need to break down my statistics really deep and dark and nitty gritty. It would take the joy out of it for me, so I don't do statistics in my reading journal. Moving past the index, and we had my goals page, which was 12 Poe picks, reading every day of the year, even if it was just for 5 minutes in the car, ending at least 3 series, 2 memoirs, never did fix the spelling of memoirs very first day, and 48 in 2023. Here's my 48 boxes, they're filled in. This is my Read 365, it's filled in. I think the only reason this has ever worked for me is because it wasn't color-coded or anything, it was just yes, no. Did you read, did you not read on this day? This is my release radar of books that I was at least eyeballing when they were coming out. I ended up adding some things in here for 24 because I didn't have a place to list 24 books. So I rectified that in my current reading journal and put in a list at the back of the journal for 2025. If they are in red, that means that I went ahead and purchased them. So some of these I still haven't bought. Like I haven't bought Bookshops and Bone Dust, which is fine because I still haven't read the other one. I bought it for Kenny, my son, but I haven't read it. And then my backlist. This is always just a random sampling of books from my bookshelf that I own physically but have not yet read. This is meant to encourage me to pick up books from my bookshelf, and there's really no rhyme or reason. I go through every year and go, yep, that one, that one, that one, that one, that one, and slap it in here with however many will fit in this space. That's how that works. If they were colored in red, then I picked them up and I read them. So yay me. As you can see, I still have a whole lot of empty spaces. Some of these repeat on my 2024 backlist, and there's some new ones thrown in there as well. I did read Theft of Swords by Michael J. Sullivan, which started a whole Michael J. Sullivan rabbit hole, as you will see moving forward. This is my FOMO list, my fear of missing out page of things that I felt other people were recommending and I just had to pick it up. And I did buy The Writing Retreat, and I did buy Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Faeries. The Last Heir to Blackwood Library I have not picked up yet, and I really just didn't use this. I did create myself a recommendations page for 2024, but I didn't call it FOMO, because FOMO very specifically had that, ooh, urge, I gotta get it now kind of thing, and I really don't fall prey to that very often. I chose not to do that. Here is where I cataloged my Poe readings for 2023. So we did The Black Cat, Telltale Heart, Cask of Amontillado, The Man of the Crowd, The Facts in the Case of M. Valdemar, Message Found in a Bottle, Murders in the Rue Morgue, Pit and the Pendulum, The Purloined Letter, The Fall of the House of Usher, The Mask of the Red Death, and The Raven. If you are interested and you have not been along on our Poe reading, all of Poe's works are public domain now. Most of them are available online in various places, and you can read them all for free. This is my book haul page. I don't think I got everything on here. I got most things on here. I do categorize it by physical book, audio, ebook, which I think there's like one ebook on here. Yeah, How to Take Smart Notes. And then whether I got it as a gift or not, which would be a physical book, but as a gift. And then here is where I cataloged my book of the month picks for 2023. And you see I skipped 4 times. My series tracker, which got to be a little bit of a mess because I picked up things that have multiple series in them, like Robin Hobb's Realm of the Elderling, so I worked to rectify that in 2024. I didn't have a place for me to put Legends of the First Empire, which is more Michael J. Sullivan, which is fine. Favorites. This should come as no surprise. I have picked my favorite book of the year. Is it the most well-written one? Maybe, subjectively, depends on who you are. It's definitely flowery, definitely has a lot of purple prose to it, which is not normally something I gravitate to, but it works for me with this author, and that is Alexi Harrow. The book is 10,000 Doors of January, one of the first books that I read in 2023. It has stuck with me all year, and it is my planner/bullet journal theme. I'm going to continue to carry it with me through 2024. It is within reach. It is right here. You can see I've got some tabs in it. There's probably going to be a reread in here somewhere of that book as well. My favorites, and this is not listed by month, I just pick 5 of my favorites. They don't even have to be 5-star reads. I think all of these were, but they don't have to be. I get to the end of the year or during the course of the year, if I read one and I know it's going to land in my top 8, I go ahead and put it on there. So Finding Me was Viola Davis's memoir. What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher, Babel. Age of Swords, Michael J. Sullivan. That's the second book in the Legends of the First Empire series, which is the 3rd series by Michael J. Sullivan that I have read in 2023. It started with the Rhaenyra Revelations, then I jumped to the Rhaenyra Chronicles, and then in the same world but with different characters is Legends of the First Empire. Age of Swords is the one that I just finished on New Year's Eve on December 31st, and I rated it 5 stars. 10,000 Doors of January, Hero of Ages by Brandon Sanderson. If We Were Villains, because I'm a slut for Shakespeare, and Unquiet Mind because I've never read it and I do live with bipolar disorder, as does the author of that book. This came down to Finding Me by Viola Davis. I just love her, and her memoir was so poignant. Babel and Age of Swords came down to Babel. 10,000 Doors, Hero of Ages came down to 10,000 Doors. If We Were Villains, Unquiet Mind came down to Unquiet Mind. This narrowed down to 10,000 Doors. This narrowed down to Viola Davis's memoir. Then between the two, I went with 10,000 Doors of January, and it was actually a very difficult choice for me, even though I am carrying it with me all the way through 2024 in my planner. And then we jumped into January. Now, I was a little bit better about keeping notes. I started off having some categories like, how did I encourage my reading habit this month? What hindered my reading this month? And that kind of falls off as it goes along. I don't do a great job with filling in this page as the year goes along. But January, Chapter 1, Black Cat by Edgar Allan Poe. These were the books that I read. I started off with Cecilia Ahern's postscript because I love P.S. I Love You. I'm actually quite a fan of Cecilia Ahern, and this book didn't do it for me. It just felt like she wrote a sequel because P.S. I Love You was her most popular book. That's kind of how I felt about that. The Highland Witch by Susan Fletcher I wanted to love so much. But this is a book that has had its name changed, I think 3 times now. It's not even sold as The Highland Witch anymore. I read it as The Highland Witch. It's named something completely different now. It started off with the name of Corag, which is our main character. That was the original title of the book. Somewhere along the way, the publishers changed it to The Highland Witch, and now it's got a completely different name altogether. I wanted to love it. There are some moments that are very quiet, and I like that in a book as Corag is telling her story. And then there's some decisions. Not everything needs to have a romance in it, and those sorts of decisions killed it for me. Leopard at the Door, my only 1 star. I do have a DNF, but this is my only 1 star. This book I read because when I picked it up in the bookstore and read the back, I thought, well, shit, this is a book that I was planning to write because I grew up in Kenya, and this is set in Kenya during the age of colonialism, Mau Mau uprising, pre-independence. And Kenya just celebrated their 40th anniversary of independence. Kenya, well done. Happy Jamhuri Day, belatedly. That was in December. And it turns out it's not the book that I would have written. It falls prey to so many colonial pitfalls. And the author might have visited Kenya, but she's never lived there, and I don't think she researched it too deeply either. That's all I have to say about that. Uneff Yourself was one of the books that I read on a whim. It's 224 pages. I did it on Audible. It was like 2.5, 3 hours. And it's fine. It is a plethora of wisdom from other people shoved into one book. That's how I'm going to explain it. Babel. I finally read Babel after everyone else read it in 2022. I did start off in my journal thinking I was going to make these little collages for books that really spoke to me, and I made 2 of them. I made one for this, and I made one for 10,000 Doors of January, and then I stopped, which is a pretty darn good thing because I would have run out of space in my journal. If you haven't figured out looking at this, most of the time I have quotes from the book. I have the book information here, quotes from the book here, and then my thoughts about the book here. I loved Babel. I thought it was ridiculously researched. I just can't even explain the level of research that went into this book. I'm also fascinated by language and the evolution of language, and that all worked in my favor, let's just say. Moving on to February, and we read The Telltale Heart for Poe, and this is where other people started jumping on my Poe read that didn't intend to be a Poe read-along. And the first book I read in February was 10,000 Doors. You can see here I made myself one of the little collages. And I start off with, oh, how I loved this book. It is an ode to language and an ode to storytelling. Is it overwritten? Perhaps, but it works. Without it, the magic would be missing. Alexi Harrow can write one hell of a sentence. Can one highlight an entire book? I could try. That pretty much sums up my feelings about 10,000 Doors of January. You'll see more of Harrow's work as we go through. Someday Maybe. This was a book of the month pick. It is about grief. It is grief. Oh shit, am I ready for this novel? I was and I wasn't. I read it very quickly, but it was hard. It was hard no matter who you are when you are grieving anything or anyone. Grief is just a gnarly place to be. It's another short one, but it's beautiful. I also really love how she explores the blending of a family in England with a Nigerian heritage and wealthy British heritage being blended together, and those trials and tribulations that went into this as well. It was really, really great. Alexi Harrow again, Once and Future Witches. I gave it a 4-star. I didn't love it quite as much as 10,000 Doors, but I loved it. And then I started down a V.E. Schwab rabbit hole. So I had never read the Shades of Magic trilogy, and I did them on Audible. Fell in love with the narrators, plural, mainly 2, a male and a female. I gave Darker Shade of Magic 3.5 stars, but as we go along, I think those increased. I think the second book, maybe I gave 5 stars too. This one I wrote, I love a book set in London. It's an Achilles heel. I love a book set in multiple different Londons. Grey London, White London, Red London, and Black London. I really love Darker Shade of Magic. And then I read Palace of Illusions. This is one of those ones that I picked up on Audible because at the time it was free. I love Indian culture. I love Indian myth. And like I said, it was free, and I gave this one 4.5 stars because it was included with Audible without having to use a credit. Loved this book. Moving in to March, and the first memoir I read in 2023. And again, everybody else had read it in 2022. I bought it in 2022 and decided I wasn't ready for it. Then I did it in 2023, and I gave it 4 stars because the content is crazy raw. I don't think Jeanette McCurdy is necessarily an author. She's a good storyteller, and telling her own story, it was great to hear her narrate it. There were some areas that it could have been cleaned up. I do appreciate the twist of humor that she can put into some very difficult situations that she went through. As a mother, this was very difficult for me to read. How anybody's mother could treat them the way that Jeanette was treated is just beyond me. And then I read Nocturnes by Kazuo Ishiguro. This has been on my bookshelf for years. Loved the first read because it's a combination, it's short stories. Loved the first one, didn't love the subsequent ones. So I gave it a 3 star. It's a good read. It might appeal to you more than it appeals to me. I had much higher expectations for it. I don't have any thoughts over here for If We Were Villains. Like I said, I am a Shakespeare slut. I do have a review on my website at dotsandbeyond.com if you want to go read it. I think I put the same review on Goodreads. I gave it a 5 star. It's pretentious as hell, but I loved every single minute of it. Every single minute of it. You can go check that out there. I just never recopied it over into my journal. Yes. The end of Bridgerton. So I had read the first book in the Bridgerton series in 2022, near the end of 2022, and in a lull of what do I read next? I don't know. What should I read? I decided to do book 2 of I Count Who Loved Me. I finished the book, but I DNF'd the rest of the series. There's just no way. These did not age well, and I realized they were written in the 2000s. They read like they were written in the late 80s or early 90s with certain tropes and things that should never have made it out of the late 80s and early 90s. And yet the television show is the biggest glow up to a series ever, in my opinion. Second book, In Shades of Magic, 5 stars. V.E. Schwab. Yeah. And then immediately the third one. And this was an immediate. I went straight. The same night I finished this one, I started this one and went directly into it and gave it 4 stars. You can see the second one was my favorite. Moving on to April. And like I told you, I got really bad about filling in this page or putting any thoughts here. Sometimes my thoughts were spewed into camera instead of them being written down. I, verbalized my review. The Girl with All the Gifts, M.R. Carey, was lent to me by a friend right before the pandemic, and I just never got to it. Finally, I read it. I love this book. This is a great book, and my friend who loaned it to me did not know that there was a second book that was then a prequel. It's called The Boy on the Bridge. She's just finished reading The Boy on the Bridge, to the point where I haven't even had time to talk to her about it yet. I need to know what she thinks, and if she has it, if I can borrow it. That's perfect. I chose not to write anything here because I didn't want there to be any spoilers when I presented to camera at the time, because this is a book you need to go in completely blind. And then I just went down so many fantasy rabbit holes, y'all, with the V.E. Schwab and then the Brandon Sanderson and then the Michael J. Sullivan. I keep going down rabbit holes that Robin Hobb. You can tell that I was starved for fantasy after not reading for a lot of years. I went through a very deep reading slump post getting my literature degree, which I realize is incredibly ironic. Fantasy's always been my favorite genre, and I just started going down, jumping into a series. Final Empire, Brandon Sanderson. I gave that one 4.5 stars. And then in May, I had a really rough May. I picked up Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Faeries in April, and I kept thinking, see, I put a little arrow. We're going to move it to May. I still haven't picked it up, y'all. I thought I was going to finish it in December. I did not. We'll talk about it. I'm going to finish it. I'm going to read it. December was not the month for me to be reading either. But I did read the next two in the Brandon Sanderson series. So I read The Well of Ascension and I read Hero of Ages, and I gave Hero of Ages 5 stars. And I wrote, and boy has Cosmere grown from this original trilogy. It's the building block of a greater world, one I'm just beginning and excited to explore. Moving into June, I was hanging on. I was pretending like I was still going to read Encyclopedia of Faeries. I did make a note here on work life continues to be a struggle, so I'm reading with my ears, and there was a lot of that this year. I did read Warbreaker, which is a standalone, at least at this point, by Brandon Sanderson. And of course, even if I'm doing them on Audible, the Sanderson books are tomes. It's 600 pages. Y'all, it takes a long time. And I am not a read with my ears at 4 times speed kind of person. I don't love it. I can do 1.5 maybe. I just don't like to miss the vocalizations and the cadence of a narrator and speed up their work. It's just not something I like to do. You know what else I've just realized? This is where we get into that aesthetic look on the videos kinds of things. Look at that candle. I have not lit that candle. Should I light my candle? I want to light my candle because it's gonna smell good. This white candle is eucalyptus and sage, and if you come to my home, it is the closest thing I have to a signature scent. It's eucalyptus and sage. How's that for a mid-journal deviation? Then I also in June read Finding Me by Viola Davis. It's exquisite. I wrote a full review of this on my website as well. Love her. I just love her. Moving into July, I was still, so I had started, hang on, where are we? After Warbreaker, I started Brandon Sanderson's The Way of Kings. And I just kept getting confused, and I decided it was time for me to take a break. So that's another one I'm going to have to get back to in 2024. And then Jane Austen is my cozy comfort read. She just is. I came to Jane Austen very late in life. I purposely avoided Jane Austen in my early years because I wasn't a fan of chick lit, which is very pretentious. I'm aware. We're over that now. We've grown out of that. I was feeling it in the month of July. I was like, I just want to go back to something comfortable. Probably because I read An Unquiet Mind and it really got me in my feels. Unquiet Mind by Kay Jemison is about bipolar disorder. I live with bipolar disorder. I was diagnosed 28 years ago. I filled this whole page with quotes. Normally I would put quotes here and I would put my thoughts here. And her thoughts were my thoughts and my thoughts were her thoughts. They were just my thoughts 40 years ago. This one that says, I lost a great innocence when I understood that I and my mind were not going to be on good terms for the rest of my life. I can't tell you how tired I am of character building experiences. I still feel that way because this illness never goes away, even when it is well managed. And I fall into the camp of managing my illness very, very well, despite everything. And yet I still feel okay. So I'm sure this got me all deep in it, and I had to take solace and change. I binged. There is a Jane Austen collection on Audible. It's an Audible original from November 5th of 2020 that has these versions of Jane Austen. I jump ahead. There we go. Persuasion is narrated by Florence Pugh. Pride and Prejudice is narrated by Claire Foy. Sense and Sensibility is narrated by Gugu Mbatha-Raw. And Mansfield Park is Billie Piper. Emma and Northanger Abbey are both narrated by Emma Thompson. It's just exquisite. And I did them all. Just all the way through the Jane Austen catalog on Audible. I've read them so many times in person, physically. I have them all. I have multiple copies of some of them. I didn't need to pick them up. I just needed to be soothed by Jane Austen, and that's what I chose to do. And I highly recommend that Jane Austen collection on Audible. It is just to die for. It's so good. Anyway, that's what I did for July and part of August. In August, we read Pit and the Pendulum. I was still in my Jane Austen binge. I did begin to read along with some of the book club books for the bullet journal. How to Take Smart Notes is one of those. Spindle Splintered by Alex E. Harrow, which is a Sleeping Beauty retelling. We've talked about this in my current reading journal setup, especially for January. And then, what month is this? We're in August. Somewhere around my birthday, I decided to read Theft of Swords by Michael J. Sullivan, which is one of the Raya Revelations trilogy. It is 650 pages. It's massive. The trilogy has been living on my bookshelf, published in 2011, probably since 2018, 2019, once they were all released, or earlier. I've had it forever. Fell in love with these characters, fell in love with this book, gave this one 4 stars, and then I've just been reading Michael J. Sullivan for the rest of the year. There's been some other things sprinkled in here, but predominantly I've been reading Michael J. Sullivan for the rest of the year. Coming into September, The Purloined Letter was our Poe read. I was reading Rise of Empire by Michael J. Sullivan. I was still reading How to Take Smart Notes, though I finished it early on. This one takes a minute. This is kind of a scary book, actually. Did it help me become a better note taker? Question mark. It's still a question mark. I don't know. Maybe. Do I regret reading it? No, but that's all I'm going to say. Rise of Empire. It's another second book that I gave 5 stars to. And then going in October, I came into October reading the 3rd of the Michael J. Sullivan. And then October, I had a great reading month. We'll just go through it. So I finished Heir of Nofren, gave it 5 stars. That wrapped up the Raya Revelations. And then I read Fragile Threads of Power because it came out right around that time. And after having done the first 3 so early on in the year, and when I read these, I had no idea this one was coming out. It was just kismet that we were going to return to this world. I did that on Audible because I had done the original trilogy on Audible, and that was a great decision because those 2 narrators that I was enamored with were back to read this book. So it was just perfect. And then because I was on a haunted house kick, I thought, well, V.E. Schwab wrote a kind of haunted house story. So I read Gallant. I was a little young for me. So, I enjoyed it. I would have liked it a whole lot more when I was 14. And then Starling House by Alex E. Harrow, which also came out this time of year. This one's creeping up on me. I have it at a 4 star. I'm leaning more towards a 4.5 the more that it has sat with me because she's my fable gal. She and T. Kingfisher can spin a modern fairy tale that I just love. Mirror Mended was the second of her novellas to go along with Spindle Splintered. This one's a retelling, obviously, of Snow White of sorts. What Moves the Dead, T. Kingfisher, which I read because I held on to it specifically for this month because I knew we were going to be reading Edgar Allan Poe's Fall of the House of Usher for October. And this is a retelling of Fall of the House of Usher. And I gave it 5 stars. Love it. I wrote some of the descriptions in this book caused visceral shudders of my personage. It's got the fungus and it's got the body horror, and I don't get all squirrely a lot, but damn if this book didn't make me shudder. And then I had started reading Radical Compassion, which was the next Bullet Journal Book Club book. I'm probably not going to finish this book. I'm just not ready for Radical Compassion, which I shouldn't admit. I shouldn't admit that. I'm not feeling it. I did finish up yet another haunted house tale-ish, and that was a reread of Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. I had already read it in the past. I had a lot of thoughts having read it 28 years after I read it the first time. And then, look, I just decided to wrap it up on 1 page, or close to 1 page. These are the Raya Chronicles by Michael J. Sullivan. Same world as the Raya Revelations, obviously. And there's a 4th, and it just didn't make it into this month. Moving on to December. I came into December reading Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. I'm loving this book. I'm loving this book. But I also came into December with COVID. It just wasn't a good time. And I've had COVID brain. Focusing has been very difficult, and reading a physical book has been nigh impossible. So it is right here, and it's going to be my first read of 2024. Mark my words. Well, I say that, and yet one of these Michael J. Sullivan books might beat her to it. But the plan is for me to read The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. The Disappearance of Winter's Daughter by Michael J. Sullivan. I have just gotten this in here in the last, what is today? Today is the 2nd, and I caught up all of my statistics for reading for 2023. I got these put in here. I got my Goodreads caught up. I got my Storygraph caught up. I might not have written reviews, but I've at least gotten my ratings and my read dates in because I was way behind. I was way behind. So this is the last of the Rhaenyra Chronicles books. Then I started the Legends of the First Empire because I was reading with my ears. And my physical book was this one. My digital book was Radical Compassion. My e-book, that's kind of how I have one of each going. I have an audiobook going. I'll have an e-read book going, which is typically nonfiction. And I'll have a physical book going. Again, these are 400, 500 page books. The other thing that I got very much attached to with every single one of the Michael J. Sullivan books is that they have a full cast, not just a single narrator. It's that whole, if you ever listen to Audible, like movie in your mind situation. I was in love with the voices for the two main characters of Royce and Hadrian, specifically Royce. It's series, just love that man's voice. And then moved into Legends of the First Empire, only to find out that I also have the full cast versions. And I think I did that consciously. That was a Black Friday sale where I bought the first 5 of these on Audible for like $2 or $3 a piece during that Black Friday sale. I still need to get the 6th one, and now I'm irritated I didn't just go ahead and buy it because there are 6 books in this series. That is how I rounded out 2023. I didn't even format it. My top authors, with no surprise, are Edgar Allan Poe, Michael J. Sullivan, Jane Austen, Alex E. Harrow, V.E. Schwab, and Brandon Sanderson. Zero surprise in that list of authors, unlike my Spotify Wrap this year, which was a total wild ride. Now, this left me 1 page before I bumped into my first lines index. Are we safe? Persephone shouted up at the oak. Was my last first line of 2023. Age of Swords by Michael J. Sullivan. They went backwards from here. Back. Oh, look, I skipped a page. I did not know I did that. You saw it here first, folks. Which is why I am moving my first lines out of my reading journal, because I need that extra space. I just anticipate that I'm going to need it. Do I think I'm going to need 2 journals? Probably not. With the way that I work and with Dots and Beyond and other things that I have going on, I don't have time, like I said, to be a 100 or 200 book reading person. And you know what? If you read 2 books in 2024, that means yes, you are a reader. If you read 1 book in 2024 and you read it with your ears, you are still a reader. Don't let anybody else tell you otherwise. If you read at all, you are a reader. Even in a dry spell of years, I still considered myself a reader. This is my current reading journal. We have set up for the year. We have set up for January. I have added myself a little January tab. I didn't do that during the setup. This year, we are doing a Grimm's Fairy Tales read-along. We would love to have you join us. All the information is down in the description box. I have moved those first lines out of my reading journal and into a special first lines journal so that I can carry this with me year to year to year until it fills up, because I am always enamored with the first lines that an author chooses to share with its audience. So we are ready to go for 2024. This page matches our Grimm theme, and then I'm ready to record whatever the first line of my book is. I know what I'm reading right now. I need to go ahead and get it in there and get it recorded in this journal. So my first lines journal, my reading journal for 2023. I hope y'all would choose to hang around with us as we do some reading in 2024. If you like this video, if you're going to be hanging around for our Grimm's Fairy Tales read-along, go ahead and give this video a big thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I will catch you in the next one.